Working the night shift at the Regal Hotel was supposed to be an easy gig. Aside from the occasional noise complaint or request for more towels, the place was quiet. But there was one thing that always struck me as odd: room 17. Every few nights, around midnight, a man would check in and specifically request room 17. He never gave his name and always paid in cash, leaving his identity as mysterious as his visits. The man himself was unforgettable, tall, gaunt, and always dressed in an old-fashioned suit that looked like it belonged in a different era. His movements were deliberate, his face expressionless, and he spoke only to ask for his room key. He'd check in, head directly to the elevator, and disappear until morning, when he'd leave just as quietly as he'd arrived. Every time, he'd leave the room in pristine condition, as if he hadn't touched a thing. I couldn't help but wonder what brought him to room 17 so often. It was an ordinary room, no extra amenities or special view. In fact, it was one of the more outdated rooms, with old wallpaper and slightly worn carpets. My curiosity started to get the better of me. I'd asked a few of the other staff about him, but no one seemed to know anything. One night, I decided to look up the room's records. The digital log showed that room 17 had been reserved by this man over a dozen times in the last few months. Stranger still, he'd never stayed more than a single night, never asked for cleaning, and never complained about a thing. There were no records of any other guest renting the room in between his stays, almost like the room had been set aside specifically for him. My gut told me something was wrong, and I decided that the next time he checked in, I'd find a way to see what he was really doing in there. A few nights later, as I had hoped, he returned. The clock struck midnight, and there he was, standing at the counter, his cold gaze fixed on me as he handed over the usual cash for room 17. This time, I noted that his hands were slightly shaking, though his expression remained cold and empty. As soon as he disappeared into the elevator, I waited a few minutes before making my move. I had access to a spare key for emergencies, so I pocketed it and made my way to the door of room 17. I knocked softly, but there was no answer. Slowly, I unlocked the door and slipped inside, my heart pounding. The room was dark, but as my eyes adjusted, I noticed something strange. The furniture had been rearranged. The bed was pushed to the side, and in its place was a large, empty suitcase, open and waiting. A faint smell of bleach hung in the air, and near the suitcase, I spotted a small notebook, half hidden under the bedside table. My curiosity got the best of me, and I picked up the notebook. Flipping through the pages, I found detailed records, names, addresses, times, dates. Each entry was written in precise handwriting, with notes in the margins that sent chills down my spine. Terms like target acquired and package delivered appeared frequently, as well as symbols I didn't understand. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead as I realized what I was looking at. These weren't just random notes, they were records of people who had likely disappeared. It dawned on me that this man wasn't here for a simple night's rest. Room 17 was his meeting point, and his purpose was far darker than I had imagined. I needed to leave before he returned and discovered me, but as I turned to go, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heart sank as I realized I might not make it out in time. I froze, clutching the notebook, as the footsteps grew closer. The door handle turned, and I darted into the bathroom, pressing myself against the wall as quietly as possible. The man entered, his heavy footsteps echoing through the silent room. I held my breath, praying he wouldn't notice the missing notebook or the slight disturbance in the room setup. He moved around the room, muttering to himself, words like target and deadline slipping through clenched teeth. Just as he approached the bathroom, a loud knock on the door broke the tension. I recognized the voice of my manager calling out to me, asking me to come out immediately. The man's face twisted with anger as he realized he wasn't alone. I could see panic flash in his eyes as he reached for his suitcase, trying to hide the evidence. But it was too late. The police were already in the hallway, led by my manager who had finally taken my concerns seriously. They stormed the room, handcuffing the man as he cursed and struggled. I handed the notebook to an officer, who nodded gravely as he examined its contents. The man's face drained of color as he realized his carefully guarded secrets were now in the hands of the law. In the days that followed, the truth emerged. The man was part of a network targeting high-profile individuals, using Room 17 as his meeting point for illicit transactions. With the notebook as evidence, law enforcement was able to connect him to multiple disappearances, bringing closure to families who had been searching for answers for years. Room 17 was closed permanently after the investigation, and the hotel was sold to new owners. I left my job at the hotel and moved to another town, grateful to put the ordeal behind me. But sometimes, late at night, I think about the man's face as they led him away. I can't shake the feeling that I had come dangerously close to becoming another entry in that notebook. But I'm relieved to know that Room 17's dark chapter has finally come to an end.